Roberto De Zerbi's tactics are some of the most intriguing in football. In fact, he's widely regarded as one of the most important gaffers of the modern era. But does that mean things will actually work out for him at Tottenham? I'm 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏, FourFourTwo's resident tactician, and this is how this Roberto De Zerbi lineup could save Tottenham. To understand his system, we first got to look at the foundations of his style of play. Press baiting is a style of build-up, and it's something that Roberto De Zerbi really helped popularise in England. These 3v3s are moments that Marseille constantly found themselves in under Roberto De Zerbi. That's because Marseille have loads of players in the first phase, so the opposition step forward to press, which means the Marseille defenders can then play into the space beyond the press, which again is core to the way De Zerbi wants to build up and play his football. Lewis Dunk, during De Zerbi's first 2 seasons at Brighton, had completed the most passes in the Premier League out of any player. Now, Lewis Dunk wasn't just pinning about passes for the sake of it, and it wasn't a coincidence that he was playing so many passes. It's because that is a core of De Zerbi's football. When we look at the Tottenham backline, De Zerbi makes perfect sense for that way of playing. Cristian Romero is arguably one of the best passers through the lines out of any player in the Premier League. So you'd imagine he'll be happy to have a lot of on-ball responsibility, just like Lewis Dunk did at Brighton. However, there's someone who actually benefits more than Romero from De Zerbi's style of play, and that's Vicario. I know, I can hear you through the screen. Vicario's useless with his feet, or at least he has been since 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 left the club. And that's the key. 47% of Vicario's passes have been long passes this season, which yes, is pretty normal for a goalkeeper, but in the first season of 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏, only 21% of Vicario's passes were being sent long. And I'd argue that Ange's first season is when we really saw the best of Vicario. Ange's build-up wasn't identical to De Zerbi's, but the idea behind taking risks and playing quite a few short distance passes was the same. And actually, with Ange, there's a lot of things that are similar between him and Roberto De Zerbi. Big Ange gave his fullbacks utility roles. By that I mean they would invert on the inside, but also they would be expected to get forward and join the attack if that opportunity arose. Both Destiny Udogie and Pedro Porro both really did perform with that responsibility given to them, which is something that I think De Zerbi could give back to them. The fullback is in midfield here to pull the opposition narrow and give the winger a 1v1 against his fullback. The ball's then played to the winger, he bounced it and spins in behind to attack the open space. Then in this instance, it's a completely different story. The fullback is all the way back here, but as soon as that wide man picks up the ball, the fullback legs it and manages to get around him, make that overlap and run, split the defender's mind, and give space for the winger to cut inside and produce something. Both those things fit the profiles of Porro and Udogie. Well, Udogie if he can stay fit, but even if he can't, his best football did still come when he was given that responsibility to do all that sort of jazz as a fullback, which again, I think De Zerbi will give to him. So we've got the backline pretty much set in stone, and we will get onto the midfield very shortly, but I want to first talk about the wingers, because they kind of go hand in hand with the fullbacks. Marseille's top dribblers and top scorers see 2 of their wingers in the top 5 for both of them. In the modern game, a high scoring winger is not mental, but a guy who shoots a lot, scores a lot, and also takes a lot of take-ons, that is pretty rare. However, in a system in which the opposition are baited out to press, and then the opposition's fullback is split between marking his opposing fullback and also the opposing winger, it does make a lot of sense. Now, a player who fits the mold of being direct, being a high volume shooter, and also attempting a lot of take-ons is 𝗕𝗫𝗃𝗃, and fortunately, he's back from injury pretty soon. Look at this here. 3 defenders could easily have impact on 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗃 and where he goes with the ball, but instead he takes a touch wide, which creates a 1v1 between him and the nearest defender. He then uses just pure pace to accelerate away and then attack space and deliver into the box. Kudus is just simply incredible in those 1v1 battles. Compared to every other Premier League player, he sits 5th in the league for most dribbles completed per 90 minutes. And it's important to remember, he was playing in less favourable conditions than you expect he will do under De Zerbi. By that I mean he was usually in a 1v4, whereas De Zerbi will try get him into more 1v1s. So Kudus slots in on the right, but what about the left? Xavi Simons, potentially even Lucas Bergvall? No. It's Mathys Tel. In attack, Pedro Porro's crossing will be utilised. It's a must, it has to be utilised. But that means that you can't just have Solanke or Richarlison attacking the cross, you need other players, like 𝗬𝗀𝗘 at the back stick. 𝗬𝗀𝗘's ability to arrive at the back post and sniff out a chance would make perfect sense to get the most of Pedro Porro's ridiculous crossing ability. But 𝗘 does still have some issues. When receiving with his back to goal, his touch is often very loose, which means he's not the most secure player in possession. However, I think De Zerbi's ideas behind his attack can certainly help manage that with 𝗘. Because the opposition's midfield line is often dragged high to press, the opposition's fullback doesn't really want to over-engage with his winger, which means a De Zerbi winger is often given time to take a touch, then square up his man before having to commit to being in a duel. That's because the wingers are isolated with the fullback. A fullback then wants to protect the space between the winger and the goal, because if he overcommits, he can often end up being in a rondo and getting passed around him. Which is why I think 𝗘 can be really important for De Zerbi in this Tottenham team, because he will be receiving the ball high, already facing goal, and as we know, he is a high volume shooter, which De Zerbi loves. He will often rotate into midfield, then take a small touch before getting a shot off early, which again is something that De Zerbi will want. He wants his winger to be taking plenty of digs towards goal. So there's the goalkeeper, there's the defence, and there's the wingers. But what about the midfield? Well, I can imagine Roberto De Zerbi is going to be a little bit frustrated with the midfield that he's got in front of him. Spurs midfield lacked any sort of real progressive passer, someone who will get on the ball, fire the ball through the lines continuously and break the opposition's pressing structure. When beating the press, a midfielder will either come in and bounce the ball to the opposite side of the defence so then the defender can play forward, or they'll be expected to get on the ball, receive on the half turn and then fire Tottenham forward. Which when you look at the Tottenham squad, there's not many options for De Zerbi, but when you look on a technical level at the players, 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 is probably the best fit. His performance against Atletico Madrid was one of a future midfield general who has every tool in his locker. Here he sees a loose ball, beats an Atleti player to the loose ball, and then starts an attack instantly with his first touch. That ability to cover ground, retain possession, but also fire your team into an attack is so important for a manager like De Zerbi, who is attacking minded at the forefront of his philosophy. So I think 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 is a shoo-in. But at Brighton, we often saw a double pivot under De Zerbi, so we need to look at who his partner is actually going to be. Clips of Roberto De Zerbi with 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 have already emerged, and looking at it, we either have a match made in heaven here with 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 projected to be one of the best midfielders in the league in 2 years' time, or we have an environment that 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 could really struggle in. The midfielders De Zerbi used at Brighton are largely cut from the same cloth. They're all action players. 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 probably falls onto the attacking side of that all action category, which to me says he could be really important in this De Zerbi system. 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 can get forward and help pin back the opposition's back line, whilst also having the brain and the IQ to latch onto those balls that are going to be played into the box. Something that De Zerbi looked to utilise with his midfielders whilst he was over in France. So that leaves us with just the number 10 and the centre forward to work with now. The former Marseille manager will want a number 10 who can knit play together, can play those short passes and also can operate in multiple different positions to join in with rotations. Which, for me, leaves a huge opening for Xavi Simons to finally come onto the main stage and grab the spotlights. Xavi Simons' heat map from this season shows him having that pretty heavy bias for the left-hand side. He wants to get the ball there, and then he wants to look to then play inside or play forward from that zone. Now, with De Zerbi encouraging his wingers to be pretty free in the zones they operate in, Xavi Simons' ability to operate across the front three could be pretty important. Space is opened up for the Marseille right winger to come inside and drive into space here. So the on paper number 10 looks to go on the wide flank and try to get in behind the opposition's defence. He then passes the ball by the right winger who's inverted inside and then looks to play into the box as quick as he can with his minimal touches. Again, something that suits Xavi Simons. Don't get me wrong, I completely understand that Xavi Simons has been so underwhelming, but he was told to carry over large distances, which he's not great at, and he didn't really have the players around him to play those short, intricate passes, which is what he's best at. So under a new manager, we could potentially see Xavi Simons at his very best. So that's pretty much the whole team ticked off. We just need someone to lead the line, someone who can link play, someone who can get into the box, someone who can be doing a little bit of everything. Now this is the touch map of someone who can do that, operating in his own half, in the opposition's half, doing a little bit of everything. That's Dominic Solanke's touch map. Solanke throughout his time in the Premier League has been vital to his team's ball progression and build-up play, something that Roberto De Zerbi will certainly want from his number 9. However, it's not just about the end product of De Zerbi ball, it's not just how we will look eventually, it's about the here and now, and it's not going to be perfect in the here and now. As much as De Zerbi loves his intricate passing football, don't be surprised if we see long balls and direct passes until things have really settled, potentially until the end of the season, which means Solanke's job and his ability to make the ball stick is going to be even more important. So that's my predicted XI, at least for now, but it's pretty easy to just make a predicted XI with a few little things in about the manager. I bet a lot of Spurs fans are actually worried about how quickly that 11 will gel and work together. Brighton saw 5 winless games in De Zerbi's first 5 fixtures at the Seagulls. However, it actually wasn't that bad. In his first game, they drew 3-3 with Liverpool, and 100% of Brighton's shots came inside the Liverpool box. They weren't just having pop shots, they were creating real high-value chances, even though they were away at Anfield in De Zerbi's first game against the Jurgen Klopp Liverpool side. I'll give you the truth, the objective truth. Roberto De Zerbi's system is intricate and it's complicated, but that doesn't mean it's nailed on to take years and years for the Tottenham players to grasp it and understand it. Just like it doesn't have to take time for you to go and like and subscribe this video, because I'll be back again next week with more analysis. Who knows, it might be about Tottenham's historic weekend win. Let me know. Maybe it is. Maybe you're watching after that. And yeah, I'll see you next week.